The hallway light on the second floor turned on every night at 3:17 a.m., even after Daniel shut off the breaker to the entire house. That was the moment he understood it wasn't a wiring issue. He and Marissa had bought the house too quickly. The price was low, the cul-de-sac was quiet, and according to the realtor, it had been vacant for 7 months. Vacant meant clean. No baggage, no history clinging to the walls. But on the very first evening, while they carried boxes inside, the neighbors stood in their driveways watching a little too long, as if they were waiting to see how long the couple would last. Inside, the house smelled like fresh paint, but beneath that was something else, faint, almost unnoticeable at first. Cigarette smoke. The first night, Daniel woke to footsteps upstairs, slow, even, back and forth across the hallway. He checked every room. Empty. The third night, Marissa heard it too. The footsteps were faster now, restless. When Daniel installed motion sensors in the hallway, the light began switching on without any sound at all. Click, bright hallway. Click, darkness. As if someone were walking past them without leaving a trace. The smell of smoke grew stronger. It only appeared after 3 a.m., always upstairs. Marissa stopped going up alone. She said she felt watched, said someone stood behind her whenever she closed the bedroom door. Daniel tried to stay rational, but one night, he forced himself to stay awake. At 3:16, the house was silent. At 3:17, the bedroom doorknob slowly turned downward. Not violently, not urgently, carefully, as if someone were testing whether it was locked. Then the hallway light snapped on, and both of them heard it, breathing, deep, ragged, right outside the door. That was the moment the fear stopped being theoretical. They called the police. The officer searched the entire house. Nothing. Old pipes, old framing, he said. Homes make sounds. But later, while removing a loose closet bar in their bedroom, Daniel noticed paint peeling behind it. Underneath were deep scratches carved into the drywall. "We never left." The letters looked old, as if they'd been painted over more than once. When the officer stepped back into the room to take a look, the message was gone. The wall was smooth, freshly painted. After that, everything escalated. The footsteps stopped pacing and started running. The motion light no longer triggered just in the hallway. It flickered in the upstairs bathroom too. The ventilation hummed at night, carrying that thick cigarette smell. Marissa began hearing whispers, not words exactly, just the presence of a voice. One night she woke Daniel and said she saw a silhouette standing in the doorway. Not tall, not looming, just there, like a homeowner checking on something that belonged to them. The climax came when Daniel decided to cut the power completely. He wanted proof it was electrical. He shut off the main breaker. At 3:17, the hallway lit up anyway, not from the fixtures. The space itself seemed to brighten. A pale, unnatural glow washing through the darkness. The footsteps were clear now, slow, deliberate. From one end of the hallway to the other, and then they stopped right outside their bedroom. The doorknob didn't twist this time. It pressed down slowly until the metal began to creak under the pressure. Daniel yanked the door open. The hallway was empty, but the air was warm, as if someone had been standing there seconds earlier. And the smell of smoke was so thick it burned his throat. They left before sunrise. 2 months later, the house was listed again. Recently vacated, move-in ready. Daniel opened the photos. In the second floor hallway mirror, faintly reflected behind the camera's angle, stood 2 blurred figures, side by side, motionless, waiting. The photo had been taken after they moved out. And if you look carefully into the darkest corner of the frame, There appears to be a third shadow, smaller, closer to the bedroom door. The hallway light still turns on at 3:17 a.m., and the neighbors don't watch the new owners anymore. It began with an old voicemail. Lucas, a quiet teenager, had been exploring his late grandmother's attic when he found a dusty phone, its screen cracked, battery long dead. On impulse, he charged it and pressed play. A distorted voice whispered, "Don't let him in. He's always behind." The message ended abruptly, leaving only a faint static buzz. Curiosity gnawed at him. That night, Lucas kept glancing at the dark corners of his room, expecting shadows that weren't there. The next morning, his parents noticed something strange in the attic. Boxes had shifted. One family photo, the kind hung in the hallway, now showed an extra figure, a boy in a white shirt standing silently behind his mother. "Mom, who's that?" Lucas asked, pointing at the photo. His mother froze, pale. I don't know, that wasn't there yesterday." Lucas brushed it off at first, but over the following days, the boy appeared everywhere. Behind Lucas, in school pictures, in old vacation photos, even at birthday parties. Always the same. Pale, expressionless, watching. At home, subtle changes began. The attic door creaked at night, even when locked. Mirrors reflected fleeting flashes of white. The air in hallways felt heavier, colder, almost charged. Lucas started leaving his room early, taking detours through the living room to avoid looking down the hallway. One evening, his father, Marcus, was reading in the living room when he noticed the photo on the wall had shifted. The boy's position had changed, now closer to Lucas in the frame. Heart pounding, Marcus checked all the other photos. In each one, the boy had moved, always behind someone, always staring. Lucas's anxiety grew. He drew pictures of the boy, always in white, always behind the family, but the sketches seemed wrong. Each time he drew the boy, the images shifted subtly, as if the boy in the paper knew he was being observed. One night, Lucas awoke to the sound of footsteps pacing slowly outside his door. Trembling, he whispered to himself, "He's here." When he turned on the flashlight, the hallway was empty. Yet, a faint outline of the boy lingered in the reflection of the bedroom mirror, his head tilting slightly, watching. The family tried to leave, thinking a new environment would stop it, but even photos taken in new places began to reveal him. Shopping trips, parks, and restaurants, always the boy, in white, in the background, staring. Desperation crept in. Marcus suggested covering the photos, storing them in boxes, but each morning they were repositioned. The boy seemed alive within the frames, manipulating their reality. The air at home grew oppressive. Sounds echoed in empty rooms. Lights flickered with unnatural rhythm, and shadows elongated impossibly. The final straw came on a rainy evening. The family was gathered in the living room when the lights went out completely. In the faint reflection of the window, Lucas saw the boy, no longer behind anyone, now standing at the threshold of the front door, small smile, frozen, eyes hollow yet knowing. The door did not move. No one entered, but the presence was unmistakable. The family did not speak of the boy after that night. Yet every time they glanced at a photo, even on their phones, even old digital backups, he was there. Watching, waiting, silent, patient. And sometimes, when Lucas drew him in sketches, the boy seemed to tilt his head, as if acknowledging that he knew Lucas was aware, and that it would not end. The house remained unchanged on the outside, ordinary and calm. But inside, reality had shifted. Every shadow, every reflection carried his gaze. The feeling never left. The boy was not just in the photos anymore, He had become a lingering presence, unmovable, inescapable. Lucas often whispered to himself in the dark, "Why here? Why us?" The voice in the voicemail echoed endlessly in his mind. The attic phone sat on a shelf, dead, silent, yet he never dared unplug it. And so they continued life in a careful, quiet terror, always watching, always wary, never turning their backs. It was a rainy evening when Emma found an old cassette on the attic. On it was a handwritten label, now faded, "Do not listen after dark." She hesitated, her fingers trembling, but curiosity got the better of her. Inserting the cassette into the player, the room filled with static noise, and then faint, indistinct voices could be heard. At first, it seemed almost amusing. Whispers she couldn't quite understand, as if people were talking in a crowded room. But soon she noticed something strange. The voices imitated her own words, repeating her thoughts, her fears, almost predicting them. Emma tried to stop the cassette, but it wouldn't come out of the player. The static grew louder, more insistent, like someone breathing behind her. Shadows in the corners of the attic began to distort unnaturally, stretching toward her. She froze, her heart pounding. Every flicker of the lamp cast shapes in the corners that hadn't been there a moment before, forms that made no sense. Days passed and Emma became withdrawn. Every sound, a dripping faucet, wind against the window, felt foreign, as if an unseen presence was watching. Her friends noticed her anxiety, her eyes constantly darting to the corners. At night, she began to hear her name whispered through the walls, softly, almost tenderly, yet cold and terrifying. One night, she woke to see her reflection in the mirror moving independently. She wasn't moving, but the reflection tilted its head, silently smiling, eyes unnaturally wide and knowing. The cassette lay on the floor by her bed, spinning endlessly, playing voices that weren't hers. Emma tried to destroy it. She cut it with scissors, burned it in the fireplace, even smashed it with a hammer. But every morning the cassette reappeared on her desk, intact, waiting. Beside it, shadows seemed to gather into human-like silhouettes at the edge of the lamp's light. Then she started finding messages written in the condensation on mirrors she hadn't touched. "We are always here." Her apartment grew colder, lamps flickered, doors creaked on their own. She felt watched everywhere, in photographs, reflections, even in the faint static of the television. Emma began recording herself, hoping to catch proof, but on playback, her own movements were wrong. Moments she didn't remember, glances to corners, whispers under her breath, were captured as if someone else controlled her. The cassette imitated her, predicted her, drawing her into its rhythm. One evening, a friend stayed over, sensing her anxiety. The cassette played by itself, and the friend clearly heard a voice. "Now she is ours." Emma turned, eyes wide, but her friend saw nothing. Only shadows folding closer, waiting. The friend left pale and silent, not speaking a word for days. Emma locked herself in her apartment, trying to ignore the cassette, but the whispers turned into voices of people she knew, echoing through the walls, speaking her secrets, fears, and warnings she had told no one. Mirrors reflected more than her image. Faint silhouettes lingered in the corners. In the end, she stopped speaking. She only stared at the spinning cassette, eyes fixed, shadows curling around her, whispering. She could no longer tell what was real. The rain outside never stopped. The voices never ceased. And the last time anyone saw Emma, she was staring into the mirror, unblinking, a faint smile on her lips, as the room filled with shadows moving without light. No one knows what happened to her. But they say if you find a cassette labeled "Do Not Listen After Dark," the whispers will start repeating your thoughts. And if you're not careful, you might see your own reflection smiling back at you, even when you haven't moved. These stories remind us that the unknown often hides in the ordinary, in photos, in reflections, in forgotten objects, and fear can creep in quietly before we even realize it. If you enjoy these stories, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment sharing your own terrifying experience.